Today we're diving into a really powerful analysis from AquaV's advisors, that's AquaV's, called the System Series Tariffs. It puts forward a pretty radical idea. What if tariffs aren't just some boring policy tool, but are actually a necessary shock, intentionally designed to rebalance a broken economic system? Let's get into it.
So when you hear the word tariffs, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, right, it's probably something like taxes on imported goods, or maybe those headline-grabbing international disputes, trade wars. The word itself is almost always wrapped up in conflict. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that's not even the main story?
Okay, so here's the core idea from AquaV's advisors. They argue that the real purpose of a tariff isn't just to be a tax. It's meant to be a catalyst, a deliberate shock that you inject into a system that has become dangerously unbalanced, a system that needs to be forced to change from the ground up. So to really understand the treatment, we first have to diagnose the illness.
Right, let's play doctor and diagnose the system. Before we can wrap our heads around why a shock like tariffs might be necessary, we have to get a clear look at the symptoms. And believe me, the data paints a pretty stark picture.
Just look at this chart. That curve is practically going vertical. It shows that the United States piled on more national debt in just the last 4 years than it did in the first 220 years of its entire history. Just let that sink in for a second. That isn't just growth, that's an explosion. And it is a massive red flag that the system is on a completely unsustainable path.
And all that debt? Well, it comes with a huge price tag. As you can see here, the interest payments alone, just the cost of servicing the debt, now cost more than the entire U.S. defense budget. The AquaVis piece points out this is a major historical warning sign. Historian Niall Ferguson calls it a rule, basically. When great powers start spending more on their debt than on their defense, their decline is often right around the corner.
But here's the thing, it's not just about how much debt we have, it's about what we're actually getting for it. And this chart is absolutely crucial. It shows that our debt is growing way, way faster than our economy, our GDP. That means we're getting diminishing returns. For every new dollar we borrow, we're getting less and less economic growth. It points to a really serious problem with how we're investing our money.
So this unproductive debt, it's really just one symptom of a much larger disease. According to AquaVis, it's all part of this deeply unbalanced system. And they pinpoint 3 key areas where you can really see it: wealth, consumption, and market concentration.
First, let's look at wealth. This graph is just staggering. The top 10% of the U.S. population now controls over 60% of all the assets. Meanwhile, the entire bottom half of the population, 50% of the people, holds just 5% of the wealth. I mean, that's not a gap, it's a canyon, and it's a direct result of how the system is designed to work.
And that massive wealth imbalance naturally creates a consumption imbalance. Turns out, that same top 10% is responsible for over half of all spending in the entire country. This makes our economy incredibly fragile, right? It's dangerously reliant on the spending habits and, frankly, the stock portfolios of a tiny minority of people.
And get this, even the engine that drives so much of this wealth, the stock market, is itself dangerously concentrated. This chart just lays it bare. Just 5 companies make up almost a third of the entire S&P 500's value. So when you think you're buying a diversified index fund, you're not. You're actually making a hugely concentrated bet. It's concentration all the way down.
And if there's one number that just captures the sheer extremity of it all, it's this one. The average CEO now makes 400 times what their typical worker makes. The point here is, the system isn't broken. It's working perfectly. It's producing these extreme outcomes by design. So what exactly is that design?
Okay, so this takes us from the symptoms to the root cause. According to the AquaVis analysis, none of these imbalances are accidents. They all stem from a fundamental conflict right at the heart of the system, the battle between capital and labor. You see, for decades, our system has been engineered to prioritize certain things over others. It has consistently chosen consumption over production, short-term profits over long-term building, and most importantly, it has prioritized the returns to capital, that is, owners, over the wages of labor, the workers. This slide right here really gets to the heart of the entire argument. You see those 2 lines splitting apart? That orange line, representing labor's share of the economic pie, is near an all-time low. And the blue line, representing capital's share, is near an all-time high. To put it simply, our system is rewarding owning stuff way more than it's rewarding doing stuff.
So what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, it looks like decades of offshoring our manufacturing.
Because the system rewards capital, companies had a huge incentive to move production overseas, slash labor costs, and pump up their stock prices. The West became an economy that mostly consumes things, not makes things, all propped up by a fragile global supply chain and driven by the financial interests of a select few. You see, it's all connected.
Now this brings up a huge question. If the system is so obviously unbalanced and fragile, why doesn't somebody just fix it? Why does it just keep chugging along? Well, the answer comes down to two things: power and inertia.
Here's the simple, maybe uncomfortable truth of it all. The very people with the most power to change the system are the ones who benefit from it the most. For them, the system isn't broken at all. It's working exactly as it's supposed to. So you have to ask, why would they ever willingly change a machine that serves their own interests so well?
And this slide really shows you why that inertia is so hard to overcome. On the left, you see the average age of our political leaders is steadily climbing. On the right, you see that older generations hold the vast majority of the wealth. When you put those two things together, you get this powerful incentive to just preserve the status quo, to focus on short-term stability, not long-term foundational change for the future.
And what's the result of all that inertia? Well, this: a complete collapse in public trust. When the vast majority of people feel like the system isn't serving them, that it doesn't represent them, they lose faith in its most basic institutions, whether that's the government or the media. The data here is crystal clear.
But here's the thing about systems. No system can stay pushed to an extreme forever. It's like stretching a rubber band. Eventually, it snaps back. When things get this far out of balance, counterforces always emerge to restore equilibrium. The Aquavis article even brings up the idea of a fourth turning, which is a theory about historical cycles, where crises tear down old orders to make way for new ones. The point is, change is coming. It's inevitable. The only real question is how it arrives.
And that brings this whole argument full circle. If the system is sick, if it's deeply imbalanced, and if it's designed to resist any gentle attempts at change, then maybe, just maybe, it requires a shock to force a reset. And that brings us right back to the original idea: tariffs as the treatment.
So let's look at a new definition. A tariff is no longer just a tax on goods. In this framework, it's a strategic tool. It's a catalyst that's intentionally injected into the system to force it to confront that foundational imbalance between labor and capital, and to begin the painful but necessary process of rebalancing. And this is really the key takeaway from the whole thing. Doing nothing is an active choice. It's a choice to keep going down the same unsustainable path. Tariffs, as disruptive as they might be, are designed to make that choice impossible. It's like burning the boats after you've landed on an enemy shore. There's no retreat. The only way forward is through.
And so that leaves us with one final critical question. The analysis from Aquavis makes it pretty clear that the system rebalancing isn't a matter of if, but when and how. The choice isn't really between change and stability. The real choice is, do we proactively shape that change, or do we just sit back and let chaos shape it for us? A powerful thought, and one that sets the stage perfectly for part 2 of their series.